sound of the drum calling players to the game of the new world order. Don't be caught unaware when the heads start rolling. No, it couldn't happen here. I know it wouldn't happen here. But I will not submit to authority of man. I'm alive, I'm awake. This is more than I can take. If you had an open door, would you kill a little more? Listen to the cries of the dead in the wake of the Sudan. Is there no one out there? I see blood in the sands of despair in Africa. Listen to the sound of applause in a chamber full of men selling out their people as they plan their assault on the heart of America. No, it couldn't happen here. I know it never happened here. I will not submit to authority of man. I'm alive, I'm awake. This is more.
And hello, everybody. This is Chuck Horton bringing you another edition of Double Cross Radio. Whoa. Sorry about that. Not running his technical apparatus very well, apparently. Now, anyway, welcome, everybody. Kind of getting a unorganized beginning because I had a long day at work today, and I just got home. And there it goes again. Okay. Anyway. Tonight's show is going to be on. We're going to discuss some things about some books I've been reading. And one that I'm just finishing up this great book by Jeffrey Tucker. It's called A Beautiful Anarchy. It's a collection of columns that he's written various times over the last several years, and he put it together in this book, and it's he just has Jeffrey Tucker. If any of you people aren't really familiar with him, he has to be one of the most positive, optimistic people I've ever met in my life. Reading this book is just really inspiring. He talks about all the positive things that are happening, and he instead of worrying about the negative stuff, he does spend some time complaining about things that are intrusive and onerous that the federal government's in charge of, but he also spends a lot more time talking about the advances in civilization, the things that we have today that weren't available, even 10, 15 years ago. And I just, in reading the book, I just got the feeling that Jeffrey Tucker is kind of like me, that he just marvels at all the things that have happened during his lifetime. I was born in 1951, and my earliest memories are probably about 1954, 55, somewhere in there. I start to have pretty consistent memory of things. Anyway, from that time forward, I remember the first car we had as a family. It was not that great a car. When my uncle came over, and when my mom had purchased it, my uncle came over and helped her wax it and make it look nice and everything. But that car just spent more time in the garage, at the mechanic's garage, than it spent in our garage. And a few years later, we ended up getting a Volkswagen, and anyway, the Volkswagen lasted for about 30 years. It was my car to drive for a while, and then my younger brother drove it when he got to driving age, and it was his for a while, and then I don't know what exactly happened to it when when he was driving it, but it's gone. But during all that time, we were growing up, because it wasn't a very affluent family. I remember when we first got a television. That was a big deal. television. Whoa. And actually, there was, and at that time, Medford had one TV station, and but it was still pretty cool that we had. And actually, between you and me, the programming on that one channel and the little tiny black and white TV was probably superior to anything you can find on the hundreds of channels today. There are some really great shows on there, some variety shows, comedy shows. It was pretty incredible, but that was just one thing. That was the TV replaced the radio for us. But not entirely. We still listen to programs on the radio sometimes. And we had a phone. My grandmother had one of those old rotary phones like you see in the 1930s and 40s movies. And it was so hard to turn that rotary phone when you would go to dial it. You had to hold the phone down, and trying to make the dial rotate, you would move the phone all over the table and nothing would dial. It was a a clunky piece of equipment, but it worked. And we had a much more modern phone that was much easier to dial, but still a rotary dial. And I remember when we got our first push-button dialing phone, that was like, whoa, look at this. It's like the Jetsons. And I was still a kid. I was like 14 or 15 years old then. We got a push-button phone. That was really something. I remember going down to San Francisco for a gift show. Our family had a retail store, and we would drive down to San Francisco for a weekend trade show every summer, towards the end of summer. And if I was lucky, there would also be a baseball game being played that weekend. And if I was good, my grandmother and my mom would take me to a baseball game. And so I remember a game in 1969 where while we were there watching the game, an announcement came over the loudspeakers announcing that men had landed on the moon. And everybody just went berserk. And a few innings later, a pitcher for the Giants named Gaylord Perry, who's famous for grease balls and everything else, illegal pitches, he hit a home run. And the next day I read in the paper that when he had been a rookie down in Arizona in the instructional leagues, he looked pretty good in batting practice. And some said, well, it looks like this kid might be able to use as a pitch hitter sometime. And the director of player personnel for the Giants at that time said, no, they'll put a man on the moon before this guy hits a home run in a major league game. And so that guy was very prophetic, because it was almost exactly 36 minutes after they landed somebody on the moon that Gaylord Perry hit his first and only major league home run. Now that was kind of unusual. I always remember that for that, but it was also extremely hot on the drive back from the gift show, and it was so hot that the car overheated, so we pulled off and we spent a day in a swimming pool in some small town along the highway there. It was they had Interstate 5. It was in by that time, and I don't remember the town, but it was hot, and we got out. They had a swimming pool. Put on my swimming trunks, and I got in the pool. I stayed in the pool until the sun went down, and then we got something to eat, and we watched whatever television coverage there was of the man landing on the moon. That was 1969. I went off to college soon after that, and I got introduced to computers. Computers were a big part of the college life. These weren't computers like we have now on our desktop. This was like big mainframes. They took up whole floors of buildings, and you would have a terminal that would access that computer, and you could get, for being in these classes, you'd get little cards that allowed you so many minutes per week on that computer, and you could go in there and you could access it with on that terminal. And what you would do prior to that is you would type in things that you wanted to do, the programming that you wanted to do. You'd type it in on these punch cards, and then when you got your allotted time on the computer, it would run the punch cards, and it would do all the series of things that you wanted to do, and it would tell you if you'd successfully done your program or not. And if you failed, then you had to go back and retype, check all your punch cards and whatever. But it was still pretty amazing what you could do. You could write programs to do incredible stuff. And I thought, wow, this is really amazing. And just to, the things were coming out like videotape machines where actually you could record a television program. By the way, since that first TV we got in the mid 60s, we got a color TV, and that was, whoa, bonanza. It was actually in color. I didn't know that before that. But anyway, by the 70s, we were able to record a television program on a thing called a videotape machine. And this was just like, it was way too expensive for us, so we couldn't do it. But I had some friends that had that, and we were able to record programs and watch them later. I thought, this is so awesome. This is so, what will they think of next? And, progress just seemed to keep rolling along. The audio, we had things called 8-track tapes when I was in college. And by the time we got out of college, they had come out with these cassettes that were much handier to use. And they still had some problems. They would get all gummed up and crap out in the car, and you have to pull over and pull all the tape out of the tape machine because it's all tangled up in there. Because they had to be cleaned frequently, otherwise that would happen, and that wasn't so great. But it wasn't long before there was something coming out called compact discs. And you get a compact disc player in your car, except they were a little sensitive to bumps and jarring and things like that, so they had to keep refining that technology till they got ones that really worked well. But that had to be the ultimate. Then you could have a compact disc, and you could have this great sound quality in a car, and you could turn up loud enough so you could cover up all the road noise and just drive around listening to music. That was really something. Computers were getting smaller. They actually were going away from mainframes, and they were introducing personal computers. And this was pretty cool. You could actually, for about $2,000 to $3,000, you could get a small personal computer that could do a lot of things. And the programming languages had gotten simpler, so that you didn't have to have take college courses in computer languages in order to operate them. You could basically just kind of point and click and do stuff. And that was pretty awesome. And anyway, we just continued to progress. The videotape machines got more and more advanced, and finally you could actually record programs onto DVDs, and computers kept getting smaller and smaller, and then these things called iPhones came out. Or actually they weren't iPhones to start with. They were mobile telephones. And that was pretty cool. Up to that point, I was working in the family business, and I felt like I could never leave because it always seemed like something happened when I was gone, and I'd have to come back and spend hours trying to clean it up or to fix it or whatever. So I felt like I was kind of like chained to the store during hours of operation. But with this phone, I could be out doing something else. They could call me if there's a problem. I could either hurry back to the store, or I could give them instructions on how to do something. That seemed like it gave me a lot more freedom and flexibility. It was a bag phone, if you can believe that. It was like carrying around a little purse on yourself to have your portable phone. It was like a phone that worked kind of like a radio does. It was an analog type device. But the phones kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and they could do more and more things. And the computers were getting smaller and smaller, and they could do more and more things. And all this stuff happened in my lifetime. And this, in the 64 years I've been on this planet, I've seen just amazing progress, and mostly in electronics, but in all things. I mean, cars today are so much better than those first cars we had. And they have a lot of the benefit of more and more advancing technologies in computers and robotics, and finding new ways to use materials that are lighter weight and stronger, and making the cars safer. There's fewer highway deaths per capita now than there used to be. Cars are easier to drive. There's just been tremendous advances in my lifetime. And I wonder, some of you people out there listening to this, if you could think back over your lifetime, some of the things that have happened. So that's one of the things that I kind of always struck by when I read Jeffrey Tucker's stuff, because he's not talking about nostalgically about his life and how things have changed. He's looking forward to the future. He's looking at things that are being developed right now, and he's talking about how those are going to improve our lives. He's just such an optimistic person with such great insight into the possibilities that arrive with each new invention. And I just can't recommend this book enough. It's called The Beautiful Anarchy, and it's not an anarchist rule book or how to cause trouble or whatever. It's about how to be free in an unfree world. He's describing a future that we're actually, even though it may not feel like it, that all these innovations and creations are part of a whole entire system that's going to be present in the near future, that's going to free us from a lot of the things that are constraining us at this point in time. And as I was reading this week, I happened to remember a book that I had read. It's actually an old book. It was written in the 19th century, and it was written by a man named Frederick Bastiat. We've talked about Frederick Bastiat on this show several times. And this particular book was called Economic Harmonies, and I have it as an ebook on my computer. And I read it, it was a little over a year ago, I think. For the first time, I had read parts of it as they were quoted in different pieces, essays and things that I'd read. But I read the whole thing, and I got to thinking how similar Bastiat was to Jeffrey Tucker, or Jeffrey Tucker was similar to Bastiat, in that Bastiat was trying to imagine a world where civilization had progressed to a point where people were striving to cooperate with each other. They were striving to not constrain somebody else with artificial laws and rules and regulations that they would not want imposed on themselves. They were trying to live in a way that they would, and treat other people the way that they would want to be treated. And that they found that the transactions and interactions that they made would be voluntary, not forced. So that if you had something and you wanted something if you had something that other people would want, and somebody else had something that you wanted, it might be possible that you could exchange those items and you would both be satisfied with that exchange, and you would be better off than you were before. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any point in doing the exchange. And he called this kind of a society one that is voluntary. And he compared that and contrasted that to a society in which people are not controlled by market functions and economic realities and things that are done on a voluntary basis, but they're controlled by artificial constraints on their behaviors, which in the 19th century in France, where Bastiat lived, was probably not that much different than living in the 21st century America, where you have speed limits, you have to have licenses to braid hair, you have to have you have to have a special license to cut hair. You have to have permission to travel in terms of either a driver's license or a passport. You have to have there are just a lot of things that are constraints on what we would call personal liberties. And some of these things, there weren't constraints on these things in Bastiat's day. In Bastiat's day, you didn't need a passport to travel from one country to another. There were no restrictions on that. But they also, there was a lot of stuff they couldn't do then that we can do now, mostly due to advances in technology. And that's, I think, the reason that I think that Jeffrey Tucker reminds me so much of Bastiat, is that he sees that this is even with some setbacks to personal liberty, he sees that overall the future is very bright, and he's very optimistic about how things are going to end up for mankind. Now, each of us in our lifetime, I hope to live many, many, many more years, but it's possible my life is closer to the end of its time on this earth, that it'll be up to somebody else to see these things happen. But I'm hoping that I live another 40 or 50 years. I know that's over 100. I'm actually hoping for somewhere between 120 and 140. And I think with the proper nutrition that's entirely possible for people to do. I might step off a curb and get hit by a car tomorrow. There's always that cancer thing that can pop up, and I've seen it in different people. A lot of men that are my age have had problems with prostates and things like that, and I know that that's possible, could happen. So, but at the same time, I would really look forward to being able to live another 60 years and see what happens, because so much has happened in the 60 years prior to now in my life, and then things have changed so much. And I think about my grandmother's life, and she grew up at a time when her family, they got from place to place by they'd pile into a carriage, and they would be all bundled up, and they had a team of horses, and the team of horses would take them to church or to school or whatever. And that was life for her. And it was in the winter, it was quite cold. They lived in St. Paul, Minnesota when she was a young girl. And although her family was fairly wealthy, they did have a team of horses. Can you imagine? It costs probably about the same to feed horses and care for them then as it does now. So to have several horses plus children in a house and everything else, it had to have her family was, well, much better off than we were when I was a kid. And I guess she didn't marry up. She married somebody who didn't want to be close to that family, and they moved out to Southern Oregon and started a business out there. And they did okay, but nothing like the wealth that she had experienced as a child. But still, in her lifetime, she went from going from place to place in a horse-drawn wagon to seeing cars, to seeing highways, to seeing freeways. She saw. She was at that baseball game where the moonlanders settled down on the moon. She was one of the people that took me to that game. And she saw people land on the moon. She saw airplanes go from just an idea in someone's head to actually something that worked, and actually you could fly from place to place. And excuse me, she got to see him going from a propeller-driven plane to propeller-driven planes that people could actually ride in. They had commercial transport to jet planes to commercial jet planes, and she saw. Oh, what else did she see in her lifetime? She saw the invention of the radio was in her lifetime. The invention of TV. She actually was able to see some of the very first TV stations. She didn't have to wait 7 or 8 years after the television was available in Medford to see a program. She had a TV set. Well, in fact, that's what we used to do on Sunday after church. We'd go over to Grandma's house so we could see a TV. She lived in a house in Southern Oregon here that had built-in cabinets that were actually refrigerator. They were these oak cabinets that were lined with metal sheets that would allow the melting ice to drain. And they'd have an iceman come and bring a block of ice, and he would put the blocks of ice into this ice chest, and it was built into the side of the wall, and that is how they kept their food from spoiling, and they didn't have a refrigerator yet. So she witnessed the advent of refrigeration, and she lived until age 92. She fell down and broke her hip and went to a hospital to have the hip set, and while she was in the hospital, she caught pneumonia and died from pneumonia. And another casualty of modern medicine. But in her 92 years, she saw amazing things. I mean, she's got to witness all the things that I told you about computers, from nothing to something that's just incredible. I look at her life and I think, well, I still have a long time left. And look what's happened in my life. I'm sure we're going to see people living in outer space in the next 60 years. We're going to see technologies that allow us to do things that only people like like Bill Gates is able to do now. We'll see people living on ships at sea, floating cities in the Caribbean. Drew has got that as kind of a dream of having a floating aquaponic system that is just out in the ocean, and it utilizes utilizes the things that are there already present naturally to enhance the aquaponic systems that can be caged and float around with you in this floating city, and you can grow protein for people and trade and exchange, and all these things are things that are probably possible right now if there's just enough demand to make it worth somebody's while to do that. So, anyway, I'm thinking about this ways to organize society, and today it just actually struck me yesterday how profound Bastiat's work was in this book, Economic Harmonies. Now, I have this as a ebook on my computer. I don't think it costs very much. It might even be free through the Mises Institute. It might have cost $3 or $4. And it's an amazing work, and he talks about comparing the societies, the one that's ruled by constraint and a society that's ruled by cooperation. In other words, you don't force anybody to do anything. The only time you use force is defend your own properties. But most people are not going to be attacking. I mean, if there were no laws tomorrow, I'm sure that none of you would go out there and start killing people just because it was legal. We fall into these traps if we find that the laws against crime, we're kind of brainwashed into thinking they are actually effective and they stop people from killing other people, which they really don't. We still have murder. People still go faster than the speed limit. There's all sorts of there's a guy that wrote a book not too long ago. I think it was called 3 Felonies a Day, I think was the title. And he talked about how there's just so many laws that nobody can possibly know when he's breaking a law or when he isn't breaking a law in every case, because there's just too much to know. Excuse me, I have to cough again. A tickle in my throat. I needed to get a glass of water before I started up tonight. So, anyway, in a society where people are voluntarily doing things, interacting with each other, and they do things because they have these interactions for whether it be economic reasons or even reasons that are just rather subjective in terms of how they're valued. They're done voluntarily. They're done because they see that doing this, whatever they're doing, is going to benefit them somehow, and somebody else is going to benefit from whatever they gave to you, and they're going to benefit from what they get from you or whatever, whether it's just friendship or it's a business relationship or whatever. There's no laws that say, well, you can't be here right now because you're smoking that cigarette and we're indoors and there's a law against that. So you have to put that out and leave. Well, that's using the constraint to order society, and you're using constraints to get people to behave the way you want instead of getting voluntary actions. The problem with the constraints is that it causes conflict. The people that are not able to pursue their happiness by smoking are forced to go outside. The people that don't want to smell the smoke, they must feel good that they've denied this person whatever it was that was affecting them, but they're using power and force to achieve their end. And what that does is it causes that other person to resent that, and it divides people. Now, if in a free society, that wouldn't ever happen. You would, if you didn't enjoy the smoke, you just leave and you go someplace where they didn't have people smoke. Where they would voluntarily not serve people who smoked, and so those people wouldn't go there. And so you'd have businesses that allowed smoking, businesses that didn't. And if you didn't like smoking, then you probably shouldn't go to the one that allows smoking. And you just instead of forcing everybody who enjoys smoking to stop. Now, I'm one of the people that doesn't like to smell. I don't like to be in a smoke-filled room. I don't mind smoking if it's just one person, you're outdoors, or even one person inside if it's just occasionally. But if it's a lot of people in the room and there's not good ventilation, I don't like going home smelling like I'm an ashtray. So, just to be clear, just because you like or don't like something doesn't give you the right or the power to force someone else to behave in a way that is not necessarily that they're choosing. You're just creating an enemy or somebody who has ill feeling towards you. And there's let's see. There's something to be said about there's some constraints that we probably would have. We would want to have a constraint against somebody who's a homicidal maniac. It's I think those people are rare, and I don't think the constraints that we have are slowing them down very much. I mean, they're still there. They still find ways to commit crimes. I think Thomas Sowell said this really well once. He says, we already have many laws against crime, and they're not working. Mostly, I think, laws and constraints are put in place to control peaceful people who don't really need them. The people who are going to be criminal in nature, they ignore them, and they end up either living and causing great damage in society by their illegal behaviors, or being incarcerated and living at the expense of the non-criminal people who are pay for their support or their incarceration through their taxation. So, a constraining society, there isn't too much you can say about it that we really like, other than the fact if you're one of those ninnies that just likes to go around and henpeck people about their behaviors, and we have someone like that living just down the street from me. I'm just kidding. Everybody has a neighbor like that, I'm sure, that just they want to make sure that if your dog poops on their lawn that you pick it up, and if not, they're going to be circulating a petition, to take care of you, to make sure that you get ostracized by people or whatever. And people spend a lot of money building a nice house, don't want someone to put a trashy mobile home right next door to them. They want to protect their investment, so they have, they can rationalize themselves that they've protected their investment. Well, I think a more peaceful way to protect your investment is to buy enough property around the house, this house you've invested all this money in, that no one can, they have to move quite a ways away in order to, put their trashy little mobile home on it. Or you could, you could make sure that you own quite a bit of property, and you could get it so they have to be miles and miles away from your house. I don't know. You could, I guess, where nobody's that rich. Maybe those are unworkable solutions. But I think that there's creative ways to get people to work in cooperation without forcing them to behave in the manner that you think they should behave in, and making it something that they actually choose to do and you don't force them to do. And it may not always work the way that you want it to, but you can always have the option of going somewhere else and resettling somewhere else. And so, that's, I just think the Bastiat's plan, and reading this book, is he's trying to, some people say he's setting up straw men, but I don't really think he is. He's trying to give the people that he's writing this book to argue against, he's trying to set up all their reasons for being against a more of a voluntarist type of society, and gives them a pretty fair reading of why they why they would prefer, why people would have a constraining society, and all the reasons why people advocate for that. And then he one by one shows how they aren't really accomplishing what they set out to accomplish by having a society ruled by constraints, whereas society ruled by voluntary action. Every time you make an action, you're succeeding because you're doing what you would want to do, or otherwise you wouldn't do it. And so it's always self-fulfilling. People, after you have experienced that for a long enough period of time, you start to really understand that golden rule that's in the Bible about doing to others as you would have them doing to you. And that makes complete sense in that type of a voluntarist type society. And right now, if there's someone out there that wants to boo that statement, because the way they booed Ron Paul in the presidential debates in 2012, go ahead. I'll stick to my guns on this one. But I just thought these are two great reads that they've really helped me strengthen my positions, and they've reinforced my beliefs, and where I was maybe a little bit tenuous about what I really believed about something, I might have been waffling a little bit. They really helped me to set my feet on the ground and stand my ground, because they've given me a lot of intellectual firepower as to why the things that I advocate or would like to have happen can't exist. And so, again, the two books, Jeffrey Tucker's A Beautiful Anarchy, which I think is really an amazing book, and the other one is Frederick Bastiat's Economic Harmonies, which is a lot of people have, his most famous work was called The Law. A lot of people have read that. But I think Economic Harmonies is probably a much deeper, much more thought-provoking work, and it's very relevant to today's world, even though it was written 150 years ago. Okay, so that was my two things on books that I was thinking about today, and it didn't last quite as long as I thought it would, so I have about 20 minutes left. We can cover some other things that are going on right now. I know that this most recent president, I don't like to do current events because someone's going to listen to this 6 months from now, and nothing that I'm going to say from here on in is going to make any sense, because it's about stuff that happened this week, and it may or may not have been relevant. Probably isn't relevant. It's probably just something that gets hyped up in the news cycle so they can build ratings. But the Republican candidates, they narrowed their field a bit. They finally got rid of that the blimp from New Jersey, Governor Christie, and he got sent down to the minor league debate team. And so there's one less person up there to share the time with. But they're still having these bizarre questions. One of the questions that got asked to them, and I think the questioner was trying to he was trying to to supply a kind of provocative question regarding the issue of abortion. And the question was kind of along the lines of, if you could abort a Jesus, or if you not Jesus, excuse me, if you could abort Hitler, or if you could end Hitler's life as a small child, would you do it? And it's kind of a stupid question. It isn't provocative at all, because Hitler was not. He wasn't genetically predestined to be the person he became. All the research I've read show that the experiences, the lifetime that a person has, are the things that shape them and develop their morality and their way of thinking. And the genetics has very little to do with it. There's some awesome research been done on twin studies, and the twin studies actually would tend to counteract what I just said, but they also are not conclusive, because there's the twins that are brought up in the same household become very similar sometimes, the identical twins. A really famous example is the Van Arsdale twins that played professional basketball. They, over the course of their careers, their points per game average, even though they played on different teams, their points per game average was almost identical. They oftentimes, and they said this would happen to them all the time, they would pick up a phone to call the other one, and it would get a busy signal because the other one was trying to call them. And they said that would happen several times a month, every month. There's also, and those were twins that were raised in the same house. There's also twins that were raised in different households, identical twins, and they would grow up and they would be quite a bit different. They would still have a lot of things that are similar. They would still look similar, of course, but not as much. They would have different lives. They would have different kinds of careers. And so the environment that the twins were in would have a lot to do with how they turn out. And so that, this is something I think is important to note, that it's kind of a stupid question. It kind of, it kind of demands that people accept genetics as the only thing that shapes our character and our intellect, and everything else about their environment has nothing to do with that thing. And that just isn't true. And because I am the only person here tonight, and I didn't get a chance to go to the little men's room before we started, I'm going to have to take a short, quick break and take care of something. I'll be right back. And don't go away. There's going to be a little bit of dead air here. I can't play any music because I don't have uncopyrighted music. But just hang on. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry for that. So back to this train of thought. I think that the questions by and large were better than they were previously, but they're still stupid. They're not helping people choose for them. They're trying to make this entertainment so they can, get higher rated shows, and this is really kind of an important thing, and they're not highlighting the things that are really important to this country, like a prosperous economy. They're not talking about that very much, and not in terms that really gets to the real meat of what our problems are. And yet still a few candidates are able to talk about things that are relevant. Rand Paul got a couple of good zingers in against the Federal Reserve and how it doesn't really matter how much we get taxed as long as somebody else has control of our money supply. And that's just exactly true. What do we worry about? And I'm saying this facetiously, but what do we worry about our national debt if we can print as much money as we want? And that's kind of we don't really print the money. It's the Federal Reserve prints the money. And all it does is it destroys the savings of people who are no longer able to provide an income. When you get to a certain age, you just can't be productive. If you're like you depend on physical labor, you're not going to be a productive worker anymore. You're no longer going to be able to provide for your own safety. So if you don't have a family to take care of you, you're going to be between a rock and a hard place. If you've saved up some money, you could do something, but if they're continually debasing the value of that money, it's not going to be enough to take care of you the way you really need to be taken care of. So, we talked about that a lot in the previous shows about how the things should be getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper because of all the advances in science and technology that have been made. The productivity is going up. It's just everything Charles is just shouting at me that, why are we paying so much for this stuff? Well, we're paying so much for it because our money is losing its purchasing power. When I was in my early life, and I've told this story many times on the show, so if you've heard it before, go ahead and yawn. But I started out working in pear orchards, thinning pear trees prior to harvest. The fruit will grow better if it doesn't have so much competition for this. And sometimes the weight of the pears will break branches and damage the trees. So you want to thin it down so you get you get more money for these well-shaped, perfect pears or whatever. And so they would pay us $1 an hour and 10 cents a tree to thin them. And I could do about 20 to 25 trees a day. So I was making huge money. I was making extra $2.50 a day over a minimum wage, which at that time was $1 an hour. But when I first started doing this, there were still a lot of silver coins in circulation. And so, $1 an hour would be basically a silver dollar. And an extra $2.50, that would be, so in an 8-hour day, I could make $10. I could have 10 silver dollars and 50 cents. Well, if you take silver now, I think is about $13 to $14 an ounce. So that's about a couple $100 in today's dollars. But not just in a day doing just basic labor that you don't even have to have a high school education for. It's just something that, a day laborer would get to pay. Well, no one gets paid that much an hour. No one's getting paid for, people that are at that level of education and proficiency are, an 18-year-old child. Actually, I was 17, but I told them I was 18. They don't just go out and start working in farm work and pulling down $15 an hour. That's about what it would be in today's dollars. All that with the silver that I was getting paid. Well, so by debasing this money, they've stolen the value of our labor. Things like, you used to be able to buy paperback books for 50 cents, 25 cents. Now they're, $4 or $5. Things that should be cheaper. They should even be cheaper than they were then. There's more and more mechanical things being done to produce paper. The printing it can be set by computers. I mean, with all the advancements in productivity and innovation the rolling things forward, books should be dirt cheap by now. But they aren't. And it's because of the policy of the Federal Reserve. They've continually destroyed the value of our money. It now has the purchasing power. A dollar now has a purchasing power about 3 cents when it started. So they've destroyed 97% of the value of our dollar in 100 years. And that's just horrible. Well, that is something that'd be a relevant question to ask somebody. That is something that presidential candidates should be speaking to, is why are we allowing this to happen? But nobody, and I mean nobody, will ask a question like that, because that'll be the end of their career in TV and radio and whatever, because the people that run things, they're in favor of that system because they're one of the few that get a benefit from it. They're the first spenders of all this counterfeited money, and they get to spend it before it has lost its value. And so they use it to buy hard assets, and that they get ahead at everybody else's expense. So anyway, let's see, I got about 8 more minutes to fill. Today was an awesome day in the liquor business, wine and liquor business. And some of you come from states where there's open markets and a lot of freedom in this kind of business. And some of you come from states where it's even more constrained than it is in Oregon. But today was just a great day. I had a lot of fun at work. That's one of the reasons I'm a little bit late, is because I was enjoying work so much today. Part of the business I run is very tightly controlled by the state. That's the hard alcohol part of it. The state of Oregon owns all the liquor that is sold in the state of Oregon. Anything over, I think, 20 proof is, and a few of the things, I think 20 proof is, maybe a little bit more than that, but maybe it's 30 proof, 15%. Well, there's a line that they draw that stuff that's above that alcohol content, it's not allowed to be sold in any store other than one sanctioned or controlled by the OLCC, Oregon Liquor Control Commission. And then for less alcoholic drinks like wine and beer, those were generally regulated to be sold in grocery stores. They call them bottle shops, like a wine store, specialty stores, and such like that. You have to, for every kind of retail outlet, whether it's a restaurant or a grocery store or a store that just specialized in wine or whatever, they have to have a certain kind of license. And so they have these different kinds of licenses that you can get. And they're trying to move things forward to more of a free market type of arrangement. So it's not that they're it's not they're totally anal about all this stuff, but sometimes it seems that way a little bit. Anyway, in trying to do so, a few years ago, they decided that they shouldn't have restrictions on, because Oregon has some very small rural cities that pretty much there's a grocery store that serves as a post office, a hardware store. It can be a liquor store. It'll also have beer and wine. And it seems to work okay for that type of a community. What is the maximum size of the liquor store that we would allow to also operate and sell beer and wine and other grocery items? And they got to thinking about it, and the more they thought about it, they decided, well, if somebody wanted to, why should we stop them? It doesn't seem to cause any problems at any level. And so I think it was about, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago, they changed the law so that people who sold hard alcohol could also sell beer and wine. Well, when I took over this store in January, that was one of my objectives, is to convert the store into what they call a non-exclusive store, which would also sell beer and wine and hard alcohol. And today was just a fabulous day. I got a couple of orders of wine in, and I got some really excuse me. I got some really good wines that I've had the pleasure of being able to trial taste before I got them, and they're just fabulous. And I got to talk to some people in the wine industry that were just very supportive of what I've been doing, and gave me some great insight into things that could, help me grow faster or more efficiently, or even more steadily, and have real growth, not just flash in the pan stuff from advertising, doing the loss leaders and stuff like that, but how they've seen other people. They get to go to lots of different stores, and they get to they've kind of surveyed all the ones that are doing the best, and they find the things that they think are important to incorporate in your business. And I found I was doing some of those things already, and there's some other things that'll be easy to add to what I've been doing. And I'm really happy with how this is working out. I'm just delighted to be able to have all this stuff. And I find that the people that are wine drinkers are much different than the people that are alcohol drinkers. And it may seem like, well, what's the difference? But they seem more conscious of the quality and the flavor. They're quite often drinking it with dinner, and they want something that really makes their mouth water and stimulates their appetite, their taste buds, makes the food actually more savory too. And I got one of the people I got to talk today. He's actually a sommelier, and he was very interested, and he's very interesting. And he's also interested in coming on the show sometime to talk about wine, and I got really excited about that. And I think in the near future, probably in January, we're going to have him on, and he's going to talk about the how wine has grown all the way around the world, and some of the good regions you want to look for certain kinds of wine. If you happen to like a certain kind of, like one of my favorites is Pinot Noir, he can tell you that, well, it's no secret to people who live in Oregon, but the Willamette Valley in Oregon, which is about 2 to 3 hours north of where I live, is probably the best place in the world to grow Pinot Noir grapes. It has the best climate. It has the best soils. It has just about the optimum growing season. You don't want to be too long or too short. The right temperatures during that growing season. They grow some of the most amazing wine grapes in that variety that have ever been anywhere on the planet. They consistently have top wines that are among the best in the world of any kind, just from that area of Oregon. And down here in... Oops. It looks like I'm out of here.
Listen to the sound that you hear like an echo in your head. There's a strange vibration rising out from the heart of America, America. Listen to the sound of the drum calling players